Why this works. Chawanmushi is the most delicate egg preparation in Japanese cuisine, and its delicacy is built into the ratio. At 3 parts dashi to 1 part egg by weight, the custard contains far more liquid than egg. Approximately 75% of the total weight is dashi. In a French-baked custard like quiche, the ratio runs closer to 1 to 1, liquid to egg. In creme caramel, approximately 2 to 1. The chawanmushi ratio produces a barely set texture that quivers on the spoon, so soft it barely holds its own weight. So uniform, it could pass for smooth tofu. The protein chemistry is identical to any other egg custard. Egg proteins, ovalbumin, ovomucin, lipovitellin, denature and crosslink between 62 to 82 degrees Celsius, forming a continuous gel network. The difference from a quiche is that the dilution ratio is so high that the protein network is correspondingly sparse. Fewer protein molecules per unit volume means a more open, more delicate gel structure. The gel barely sets before it would liquefy again. The steaming method matters for a different reason than most people realize. Steaming produces a gentler, more controllable heat environment than baking. The steam temperature at atmospheric pressure is fixed at 100 degrees Celsius, but by modulating the steam intensity, flame height under the pot, you can hold the food at a temperature significantly below the steam temperature, because the heat transfer rate is controlled by the steam density. At low-medium heat, the food surface never exceeds 80 to 85 degrees Celsius, regardless of the boiling water temperature. This is not possible in a dry oven, where radiant and convective heat can drive the fruit surface to the oven's full temperature. The Japanese term for ruined chawanmushi is su ga haita. Literally, air has entered, referring to the pockmarked, porous texture that results from over-temperature steaming. When the water in the custard boils locally, above 100 degrees Celsius at the interior, or driven by fierce steam, steam bubbles form and escape, leaving behind a honeycomb of holes. This is the signature failure mode of chawanmushi, and the reason the recipe specifies gentle steam. Su renders the texture grainy and the appearance unpleasant. But the flavor is often unaffected, so it is an aesthetic failure rather than a safety one. Common mistakes: vigorous whisking of the eggs. Target: mix gently with chopsticks or a fork. Slow, deliberate strokes. Never use a wire whisk. Why it matters: air bubbles incorporated by whisking expand during steaming, creating pinhole-sized cavities, called su, throughout the custard. This destroys the silken texture that defines chawanmushi. What to do? Hold the chopsticks at a slight angle and drag through the egg in long strokes. Lift, drag. Minimum bubble incorporation. Let the mixture rest 10 minutes for bubbles to rise, then skim with a paper towel before straining. Not straining twice. Target: strain the beaten egg through a fine sieve once. Then strain the combined egg-dashi mixture again. Why it matters? Chalice, the white fibrous cords anchoring the yolk, and any incidental bits of shell don't dissolve in the custard. They appear as white threads or specks in the finished product. Double straining catches everything. What to do? Pour through the finest mesh sieve you have. If you see solid bits in the sieve, you needed this step. Workarounds: no fine sieve. Coffee filter in a regular sieve produces the cleanest results. Too much steam heat. Target: low-medium steam after the initial boil. Water at a gentle simmer below the cups, not a rolling boil. Why it matters: this is the single most common failure. Fierce steam, full boil, overheats the custard rapidly, producing the dreaded su texture, full of cavities. Eggs set best around 85 degrees Celsius. Sustained higher heat ruins the texture. What to do? Bring water to a boil, place cups in steamer, reduce heat to low-medium, cover. Maintain a quiet, steady steam. Workarounds: no way to control steamer heat precisely. Crack the steamer lid slightly to let some steam escape. Lowers effective temperature. Oven steam method: bake at 150 degrees Celsius in a water bath, covered with foil. Most stable temperature control. Not covering the cups. Target: each cup covered with its own lid or plastic wrap. Why it matters? Condensation drips from the steamer lid land on the custard surface as it cooks, creating pits and watermarks on the otherwise smooth top. The cover prevents this. What to do? Authentic chawanmushi cups come with matching lids. Lacking that? Stretch plastic wrap over each cup. Workarounds: for pretty presentation, lay a kitchen towel between the cup lid and the steamer lid. Catches condensation without disrupting steam. Using hot dashi. Target: cool the dashi to room temperature before combining with the beaten egg. Why it matters? Hot dashi starts cooking the eggs on contact, creating partially set lumps. The mixture needs to enter the cups uniformly liquid. What to do? Make dashi ahead, cool completely. Combine: dashi 4 parts, egg 1 part, light soy 1 teaspoon, mirin 1 teaspoon per cup. Workarounds: short on time, cool dashi in an ice bath for 10 minutes. Overfilling the cups. Target: fill to 80% of cup volume. Why it matters? The custard expands slightly during steaming. Filling to the top causes overflow and uneven cooking around the rim. What to do? Leave a 1 centimeter gap at the top. Pour through the second strain stage directly into the cups. Workarounds: for overflowing portions, scoop excess back into a measuring cup. Chawanmushi can be portion controlled. Skipping the resting step after steaming. Target: rest 2 to 3 minutes in the steamer after turning off the heat, lid still closed. Why it matters: removing immediately exposes the custard to a sudden temperature drop, which can cause it to weep, syneresis, and develop water pooling on top. What to do? Turn off heat, wait 3 minutes, carefully remove cups. Workarounds: for cold service, refrigerate the rested chawanmushi for 2 hours minimum. Develops different but legitimate textural profile. What to look for? The raw mixture: pale golden, fluid, no foam on the surface, no visible streaks of white. Strained clean. Steaming at 10 minutes, the edges are beginning to set, the center still moves freely. At 12 to 15 minutes. Gentle wobble at center when moved. Surface smooth and barely glossy. A thin skewer comes out clean. Internal temperature: 75 to 78 degrees Celsius at the geometric center of the cup. Most reliable check. Texture in the cup: quivers on the spoon, barely holds its shape. If it holds rigidly like hard tofu, it is overdone. Chef's view: the ratio argument, 3:1 versus other proportions, has a strong basis in both tradition and science. Home Japanese recipe books often specify the ratio as volume rather than weight. 3 parts dashi to 1 part egg by volume, which produces a slightly different result because the density of beaten egg is less than dashi. The weight-based 3:1 ratio in this recipe is more precise and produces the more delicate result. I find the weight method more reliable. Toppings in chawanmushi are part of its charm and represent what is seasonally available in the Japanese kitchen. Ginnan, ginkgo nuts in autumn, shrimp throughout the year, mitsuba, Japanese parsley, kamaboko, fish cake, chicken, or shiitake mushroom. What the toppings share is that they are all already cooked or safe to eat at the temperature the custard reaches. Because the internal temperature, 75 to 78 degrees Celsius, is sufficient for food safety, but not high enough to cook raw proteins properly. If using chicken, ensure it is pre-cooked or cut small enough that it reaches safe temperature. The summer version, served at room temperature or chilled, is eaten as a cold dish and requires more careful salinity calibration. Cold dulls salt perception. So the cold chawanmushi should be seasoned slightly more assertively than a hot version. Chef test notes: I tested the ratio at 2.5 to 1, 3:1, and 3.5 to 1 dashi to egg by weight. The 2.5 to 1 version was noticeably firmer, closer to a quiche texture, which many people find more acceptable, but which lacks the characteristic chawanmushi fragility. The 3.5 to 1 version barely set and collapsed on the spoon. Interesting, but impractical. The 3:1 version is the correct balance for the traditional texture, set but trembling. The double straining step was the single most impactful detail. Unchained versions with unstrained eggs had visible white threads throughout.